Hey guys, I want to first say thank you for your prayers and even this past week of just fasting. Um, from the start of the weekend, the Lord just really did a lot of amazing things. Even in the midst of all the chaos, the Lord was doing a lot of really God-sized things that I can't even explain to you right now because it would take so long. But know this, the Lord spoke through me and the Lord spoke to me in so many ways. It's probably one of the richest times I've had with the Lord. I'm exhausted from it. Don't hear me wrong, but it's been incredible. And so I'll be sharing that with the youth some Wednesday. So we may not even get into the lesson, just to be honest. Um, I just I don't want the kids to miss hearing what the Lord did. It was too good. Um, but if we do get into the lesson, this is what we're going to talk on. The title is One of Many or the One and Only. And you're going to open with an analogy for your kids that if they found somebody they dated and then they got engaged to and then they get married to, and at the altar they say, by the way, before we say this I do, is it okay for us to still see other people? Um, Obviously the answer is no. Or for a guy who may have a wallet and have a picture of his girlfriend in front, but he has a picture of all the other girls that he likes. It's not going to cut it either. So there's some issues. But you're going to see a story for the guys and one for the girls. And then how would you ask them how they would respond to that situation? That's our introduction. Then we're going to turn that and say, is that not what a lot of times we do to Christ? Christ desires to be our one and only, and yet we put him one of many. Maybe the lords of our life are our money or our family, or our popularity or things in this world or whatever. It could be a whole lot of stuff. And so I want the kids to kind of wrestle with that and see how we do that with God in the same way. And so we'll do that first, and then we're going to get into the passage. And we can look at Matthew 10 if you want to read that, the cost of following Christ. Look at Matthew 9:23, the verse we looked at last week a little bit. But the one we're focusing out of is Luke 14, the cost of discipleship, in verse 25 through, I think it's like 30. And so you're going to be in that text going two verses at a time. And then the first part talks about how we are to hate our mother, father, siblings, husband, wife, brother, and that kind of language. And so the first thing I want you to do is ask your kids, can you believe the Bible says that? And then say, is that even, does it bother us? Is that in the, does that contradict anything in the Bible? And when you get to the contradiction, is that a contradicting teaching in the Bible? Some verses that you're going to look to, you'll get on your handout sheet, is Matthew 22:39 would be one that you would say, oh, that seems to contradict that verse. Or Luke 6:23, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. John 13:34-35, a new commandment I give you, love one another as I have loved you. You are to love one another. By this they will know that you are my disciples. Or 1 John 4:20, if anyone says I love God but hates his brother, he is a liar. For he does not love his brother whom he has seen. How can he love God whom he has not seen? So is this a contradiction? God says to hate these people. Is God really saying to hate those people? Next, so what in the world was he trying to say here? Should we hate our families? What are ways people show hatred? And get them to kind of talk through that. And then, is that what Jesus meant? We're going to realize obviously not as we talk to them. Obviously, he was, as we see throughout this teaching of the gospel, that's not what Jesus was teaching. And so then you're going to go into explaining, now that you've got them curious, and something that you're going to read to them is just that Jesus it was a test. He was wanting to see where their hearts were. Was the allegiance to him? Sometimes I used to say this a lot too, and now that I think back to it, it's really wrong. I used to say God first, family second, and my ministry was third. The truth is it's God in every single one of those. And if God's first, then God's going to be seen in my family. But God's still the primary 1, 2, and 3. And the sub, like the 2A or the 2B or whatever, would be that my family is part of that. And so that's kind of the thing we have to think through, is that it's not like God's just this one top priority and then he's our top priority on certain days. No, he's the Lord over everything. He wants all of us. He wants all of our thoughts, all of our fears, all of our struggles, all of our victories. He wants everything about us. And so that's what I want them to see. He created us. He knows us better. He loves us the most. He can provide for us in ways that no one else can. He can take care of us in ways no one else can. So using that, he uses some strong language, basically saying, as much as you care for the people in your lives, they can't do for you what I can. They cannot be for you who I am, and those kind of things. So Jesus is saying, I don't just want to be first, but that I want to be everything. There is no second place in your life. It's first in your everything. So then we're going to look at the cost of, Jesus said to hate your family. We're going to look at two passages, or not passages, but stories of people from other religions in Muslim country and a Hindu country who forsook their family and took losing their family name and the provisions of their family and the love of their family. They sacrificed that for the sake of following Christ. So I'll let you read those two stories and then ask what would be the tendency for anyone whose family rejects him or her in following Jesus. So what if this was you? What would your tendency be? Would you want to go back and say, well, I guess I don't believe in Jesus because I still need food and I need transportation to school, and so start putting it in terms for that for them. The tendency would be that we would stop following a lot of times because the family and close friends, relationships, for most of us is more important. It's the most important thing for many of us, and it shouldn't be. We weren't created to be alone. It hurts when we're rejected by those who are closest to us. So again, is our value, is it found in the things we see or the things that we don't see, the things that are temporary or the things that are eternal? And so we really have to measure those things. So then most of us are going to see that we're not going to be poisoned by our family members because they don't want to be around us because we've rejected their faith to follow Christ. We don't see that happen in our lives. But here's some ways that following might disappoint those who are closest to us. And you'll read these. There's 3 examples. One is, I'm not watching that movie because I don't think it honors God. You're not left out you're now left out of the hangout time, or people might get offended and think you're just being judgmental or not invite you to ever be a part of this. So that might be the cost. Or you say, I think God might be calling me to international missions. And people say, you'll be on the other side of the world while the rest of your family does life together. What if something bad happens to them and you're not here? What if something good happens to them and you are here? Your family might not like the idea of you leaving them to go to another country, especially if it's a dangerous country. They don't like it. And the other thing is, we might say, I don't need more stuff. I think I'll make a financial sacrifice to help someone in need. You might lose out on some opportunities with friends and family. Or if you're the adult in the home, your whole family has to make a sacrifice whenever you make a sacrifice. So if our priorities are saying that we need to feed this kid through Compassion International instead of having a Y membership, or who knows what that might be, but that we give up our worldly pleasures for the sake of the gospel and for the people that God's called us to love. Okay, then you're going to do an exercise. They have a sheet that was from Not a Fan's book, Diagnosing Fandom, and there's 4 questions that they're going to go through, and the questions are, what do you sacrifice your money for? What we spend our money on, what we give the most time to is a lot of times our God. And God says that He's supposed to be the first and the only, or the one and only, and not the first among many. So money becomes a substitute for God because it promises to do for us what He wants to do for us. How you spend your money tells a story about what matters to you. And then Matthew 6:24, we'll look at that. And then when you're hurt, what comforts you? I was just recently talking at this youth group in Pennsylvania, and someone would say, well, I go to music, or I find comfort in these people. And the thing is that you'll see food, music, sports, social work, video games, a person. That's what a lot of times we say. The truth is, these things are good in their proper place, but do these people and things take the place of Jesus in our lives? And that's the question to ask for the students to wrestle with. And then after that, it's pain. It creates an honest moment when your true affection is revealed. When we're really hurting, where do we go to? Where do we find our strength from? Those are the things that let us know where we are in our walk with the Lord. It lets us know if we're a fan or a follower. It's a good test. When God allows difficulties in our lives, how do we handle those things? It's to let us know where we stand in our relationship, if we have a relationship. And then the third one is, what disappointments or frustrates us the most? You might say you get disappointed or frustrated. We all do get frustrated and stuff, but sometimes our frustration reveals something deeper about us. When we find that those things have the power to determine who we are and what kind of day we have, it very well may be evidence that something is more important than it should be. If it can ruin our day, then we're not trusting the Lord for what else amazing He has in store for us that day. It might be an indication of what might be competing for affection, that is to be Christ alone. It's supposed to all be given for Him, and yet we're putting so much of our energy and effort into these other things. Example of a dad who takes his son fishing. They end up not catching anything. At the end of the day, the father is irate that neither he nor his son caught anything that day. The priority for his father was not to spend time with his son, but rather it was to catch a whole lot of fish. And so sometimes we can even put people around us and say, well, we got these things in our life so we can honor the Lord for it, but we're still more worried about what we want to get out of it, so that we miss the whole thing of where our heart is anyway. And then the other thing is, what gets us really excited? Is it TV shows, college football teams? Is it professional teams? Is it a favorite band or singer? Like the things that disappoint us, the things that excite us can also point to something or someone that is in competition with Jesus. So I want to explain that Jesus doesn't want you to make any mistake about what following Him means. He's very clear, but accepting Him will cost you everything. And Jesus doesn't want people who half-heartedly follow Him. He doesn't want lukewarm people. He wants people who are totally committed to following Him at all cost, not knowing what the reward will always be, not knowing if we'll see the benefit and the fruit of our labors, but knowing that it's worth it. And then last, you're going to read Luke 14:28 through 30 and ask, what is Jesus telling me to do here? And it's to count the cost. What is it going to cost you to follow Christ? And that's where I want you to challenge them. What do you think it's going to cost you to follow Christ? And following Jesus may mean you lose everything and all you will have is Jesus. But the amazing thing is, even if Jesus is all you have, He's all you'll ever need. And He is far superior to anything else you have ever had, even football, popularity, family. The question is, have we counted the cost of following Jesus? And I want to close with this story. I was speaking about following Christ at this D-Now for this youth pastor. And the third session was about counting the cost. And we were actually looking at this passage and wrestling through these things. And we were praying for unreached people groups and praying for missionaries and praying for us. God, Lord, if You're calling us to this, that we would be faithful to go, and challenging just students and ourselves, and challenging myself. Lord, I want to be faithful to whatever You have for me. I prayed that whole week going in that the Lord would bring up just a weakness in me, that I'd be completely dependent on Him. And when I share this tomorrow with the youth, this is just some of the things the Lord challenged me with, because the things I was teaching, when I got the news about Stephanie, and I'll tell a whole lot more to the story than this, but for your time's sake, all the students came around me, and this adult leader who was also in there, one of their small group leaders, like you guys, he put his hand on me, and they were praying for me, and they were singing Great Is Thy Faithfulness. And here's what he prayed. He said, Lord, if the cost for David of following Christ is that he's not there for his wife in what's a bad situation, but if it goes worse, meaning possibly she dies. I mean, we just didn't know at that moment what was going to happen. Praise the Lord, it's not. She did not die. Praise the Lord, it was not as bad as it originally sounded. A lot of that, I think, has to do with y'all's prayers. So again, thank you. But when he said this, he then continued, he said, if this is the cost, is that he's here and he's not able to be with his wife in this difficult season, I pray that he would remain faithful. And I pray that he would see that you're still faithful. And what he basically said is, I pray that David will see that even as much as he loves his family, that Jesus, you're the best thing ever. And you will always be the best thing. No matter if his family is the greatest prize he has on this earth, Jesus, you are better. And that's the point of this whole series tonight. The message for the night is, Jesus is better than our greatest joys, our greatest comforts, our greatest satisfaction, our greatest victories. He is the best. And it hit me in a new way. And each day the Lord challenged me and allowed me to go through some things that were really testing where my allegiance was. Is it Him, or was it in the three things that I wrestle with? My conscience of my guilt and shame. Do I trust that the Lord is better than my failures? I love my son. I dropped him off and I had a really, really hard time leaving him. Is he better than my son? My wife, who I made a commitment to be with in the beginning until the end. For rich, for poor, and sick, and health, and all those things in between. Is Jesus better than her? And each one of those three things in this past weekend were challenges for me. And in a close friend who lost his sister, it was a challenge for me. For even the people I minister to, are the people I minister to mean more to me than the person of Jesus Christ, who I claim to follow and I claim to live for. And I walked away and I felt like Abraham and Isaac, that God called me to a place where I could possibly lose it all by earthly standards for me. And yet Christ stopped my arm on the way down and has grace upon grace given to me, that my wife is still here, is still healthy, and that my son is still here and is still healthy, and that I still have a burden to minister to those that God's placed in my life. And my relationship with the Lord needs to be better. It needs to be more sold out for Him. But this verse hit me in a whole nother way after this weekend. And I want the kids to feel the weight of that, and I want you to feel the weight of that. That Christ is better. And He wants to be your one and only. Nothing else will ever compare. And so guys, I'm praying for you as you teach Wednesday night and share these things and these truths and these challenges. And I'm praying that God speaks to you and that He changes our kids' hearts and He draws them to Himself and He uses them for a ministry that is far bigger than anything they have ever imagined or dreamed of. And they see the fruit of the cross and the fruit of the resurrection in their schools and in their communities and in their families, and that God would be glorified in what we do and that God would be glorified in what they do. And that when we all celebrate around the throne, we come back to moments like this where we remember that God was, is, and always will be the best thing this life will ever have for us, because it came from Him in the first place. And so I'm praying for you guys. Thank you for everything you do. You guys rock, and I love you guys, and thank you so much.